At 5 a.m. on the morning of November 8, 1943, Private First Class James Hartley crouched in complete darkness 30 yards from a Japanese machine gun nest on Bougainville Island, gripping a weapon his fellow soldiers had laughed at for 6 weeks straight. 22 years old. Farm kid from Kansas. 0 combat engagements with the weapon they called his duck gun. The Remington Model 11 semi-automatic shotgun had belonged to his grandfather. 12-gauge. 5-round capacity. Designed by John Browning in 1905 for hunting waterfowl, not for killing Japanese soldiers in fortified positions. 8 Japanese machine gun nests and mortar positions sat within 300 yards of Hartley's current location. In the past 3 days, those positions had killed 19 Americans and wounded 34 more. Artillery had failed. Frontal assaults had failed. Flanking maneuvers had failed. Captain Brennan had given Hartley until sunrise to prove the shotgun wasn't dead weight. 4 hours. 8 positions. 1 farm boy with a bird gun nobody respected. The other platoon leaders had called it Kansas toy. The armorer at Camp Shelby refused to store it with real military weapons. When Hartley unpacked it from his duffel bag at the barracks in Mississippi, Sergeant Lewis looked at it and said, "This ain't duck season, son. Put that thing away before someone thinks we're going hunting." Hartley carried it anyway. Across the Pacific. Through training. To Bougainville. He'd fired it exactly 0 times in combat while other men burned through ammunition with their M1 Garands and Browning automatic rifles. Now, in the pre-dawn darkness of November 8th, with Japanese voices chattering 30 yards ahead and the taste of salt and sweat on his lips, Hartley chambered a round of .00 buckshot and prepared to find out if a grandfather's duck gun could do what rifles and artillery could not. If you want to see how a Kansas farm kid with a mail-order shotgun cleared 8 fortified Japanese positions in 1 morning, hit that like button. It helps us share more forgotten stories like this. And subscribe if you haven't already. Back to Hartley. Camp Shelby, Mississippi. August 1943. James Hartley had enlisted 3 months after Pearl Harbor. He was 19 years old, fresh off a wheat farm outside Colby, Kansas, population 4,200. He'd grown up hunting pheasants in the fall and ducks along the creek bottoms in spring. His grandfather had taught him to shoot when he was 8 years old with a single-shot .410. By age 12, Hartley was using his grandfather's prized possession, a Remington Model 11 autoloader. The Model 11 was a revelation when it was introduced in 1905. Before semi-automatic shotguns, hunters had to manually pump their guns between shots. The Remington changed that. Pull the trigger, the gun fires. Recoil energy automatically ejects the spent shell and chambers a new one. Pull the trigger again. 5 rounds as fast as you could pull. John Browning had designed the internal mechanism. Long recoil operation. The barrel and bolt locked together, moved backward together after firing, then separated. The bolt stayed back while the barrel returned forward, then the bolt followed and chambered the next round. Reliable. Simple. Farmers loved it because it was nearly indestructible. Hartley's grandfather had used that Model 11 for 30 years. Thousands of shells through it. Never a malfunction. When Hartley shipped out for basic training in the summer of 1942, his grandfather gave him the shotgun with one instruction: bring it back. At Camp Shelby, the Army issued Hartley an M1 Garand rifle. 30-06 caliber, semi-automatic, 8-round N-block clip, 9.5 pounds. Standard infantry weapon. Accurate out to 500 yards. Hartley qualified as a marksman with it, but he kept thinking about jungle warfare. The briefings at Camp Shelby made it clear. The Pacific Theater meant close quarters fighting. Dense vegetation. Limited visibility. Engagements at 50 yards or less. The M1 Garand was a magnificent rifle at 300 yards, but at 20 yards in thick jungle, it was just a heavy club with a bayonet. Hartley requested permission from his company commander to bring the Remington as a supplementary weapon. Captain Brennan reviewed the request and denied it. "This is the United States Army, private. We use military weapons, not farm equipment." Hartley requested again 2 weeks later. Denied again. He requested a 3rd time through a different channel, citing U.S. military history. During World War I, American soldiers used Winchester Model 1897 pump-action shotguns for trench warfare. The Germans filed a formal complaint, claiming shotguns were inhumane and violated the laws of war. The U.S. military rejected the complaint and kept using shotguns because they were devastatingly effective in confined spaces. Captain Brennan reviewed this third request and reluctantly approved it. With conditions, Hartley would carry the shotgun at his own risk. The Army would not supply ammunition for it. If the weapon malfunctioned or proved ineffective, Hartley would be reassigned to rear echelon supply duties. Hartley accepted. When he unpacked the Remington in the barracks, the mockery began immediately. Sergeant Lewis walked by, saw the shotgun, and stopped. "Kansas, what the hell is that?" "Remington Model 11, Sergeant. 12 gauge. I know what a shotgun is, son. I'm asking why it's in my barracks." "Approved supplementary weapon, Sergeant." Lewis picked up the shotgun, examined it, set it down. "You planning to shoot quail in the Solomon Islands?" The other men in the barracks laughed. Private Kowalski, a kid from Chicago, said, "Hey Kansas, if you see any ducks, let me know. I like duck." More laughter. Corporal Davis, a Texan who'd hunted his whole life, wasn't laughing. He asked, "You bring shells for that thing?" Hartley nodded. 60 rounds of .00 buckshot. Another 20 slugs. Davis whistled. .00 buck. 9 pellets per shell, each one's .33 caliber. That'll punch a hole. That's the idea. What's your effective range with buckshot? 40 yards, maybe 50 if I'm lucky. And you think you'll get within 40 yards of a Japanese position without getting shot? I think if I'm within 40 yards, the shotgun will clear that position faster than your M1 can. Davis considered this. Maybe, but you've got 5 rounds. I've got 8. And I can reload faster. Hartley didn't argue. Davis was right. The M1 Garand's N-block clip system allowed for fast reloads. The Remington required manually feeding shells into the magazine tube, one at a time. Slower. But Hartley wasn't planning to get into extended firefights. He was planning to get close, fire all 5 rounds in under 5 seconds, and move before the enemy could react. The mockery continued through the voyage across the Pacific. Men called the shotgun Kansas Sweetheart. Captain Brennan called it the duck gun. The battalion armorer refused to clean or maintain it, saying, "That's a civilian weapon. You want it serviced, do it yourself." Hartley cleaned it himself every night. Disassembled the bolt, wiped down the barrel, oiled the action. The Remington had traveled from Kansas to Mississippi to California to a troop ship crossing 7,000 miles of ocean. It sat in Hartley's duffel bag while other men trained with their Garands, while they landed on Bougainville, while they dug foxholes and established perimeter defenses. 6 weeks on Bougainville. 0 combat use of the shotgun. Hartley carried it during patrols, but every engagement happened at rifle range, 100 yards or more. The Remington stayed on his shoulder, unused, while the M1 Garands did the work. By early November, even Hartley was beginning to question whether he'd made a mistake. Then the Piva Trail operation began, and everything changed. November 7, 1943. 1800 hours. Captain Brennan assembled the platoon in a clearing west of the Torquena River. He unfolded a hand-drawn map and pointed to a section of trail marked in red. This is the Piva Trail. Runs northeast from our current position toward the Piva River, approximately 3 miles. The Japanese have fortified 8 positions along a 300-yard stretch here. He tapped the map. Machine gun nests, mortar pits, 1 command post. They're using these positions to ambush our supply convoys. In the past 72 hours, they've killed 19 men and wounded 34. Sergeant Lewis asked, "What's the plan, sir?" "We've tried artillery. The jungle canopy absorbs most of the explosions. We've tried frontal assaults. The positions have overlapping fields of fire. We lose men before we get within 100 yards. We've tried flanking. They're dug in too deep." "So what now?" Brennan looked around the group. Pre-dawn infiltration. Small teams move silently through the jungle tonight. Get close to the positions. Assault at first light when they're least alert. Shift changes happen at 0500 hours. That's when we hit them. He pointed to 6 men. Davis, Kowalski, Martinez, Chin, O'Brien, and Kansas. You're the lead assault team. Your objective is to clear all 8 positions before full sunrise at 0612 hours. Hartley felt every eye turn toward him. Someone muttered, "Kansas?" With the bird gun. Brennan continued. Kansas requested this assignment. He believes his shotgun is effective for close-quarters assault. I'm giving him the opportunity to prove it. Brennan looked directly at Hartley. You've got until sunrise, Private. Clear those positions, or you're reassigned to supply runs. Understood? Understood, sir. Good. You depart at 0230 hours. 4 hours of movement to get into position. Questions? Kowalski raised his hand. Sir, what's our backup if Kansas' duck gun doesn't work? Brennan's expression didn't change. Then the rest of you use your rifles. But Kansas goes first. The briefing ended. The 6-man team dispersed to prepare equipment. Hartley walked back to his tent and laid out his gear. 60 rounds of .00 buckshot in canvas bandoliers, 20 slug rounds in a separate pouch, his .45 Colt M1911 pistol with 3 magazines, 2 canteens, a K-ration, and the Remington. He field-stripped the shotgun one more time. Checked the barrel for obstructions. Tested the action, smooth, reliable. Loaded 5 rounds into the magazine tube, chambered 1. 4 in the magazine, 1 in the chamber, ready to fire. Corporal Davis sat down beside him. You sure about this, Kansas? Hartley nodded. You know what happens if you fail, right? Brennan will bury you in the supply depot for the rest of the war. I know. So why volunteer? Hartley looked at the Remington. Because it'll work. I know it will. Davis studied him for a moment, then stood up. All right, I believe you. Let's go kill some Japanese. 0230 hours. November 8, 1943. The 6-man team moved into the jungle under complete darkness. No moon. Heavy cloud cover. The only light came from occasional flashes of distant artillery, illuminating the jungle for half a second before plunging it back into blackness. Hartley led the team. He moved slowly, carefully, testing each step before committing his weight. Roots, vines, mud, every obstacle had to be identified by feel. The jungle was never silent. Insects chirped and buzzed. Something moved in the canopy above. The ocean roared in the distance, 800 yards to the east. The team covered 200 yards in 90 minutes. At this pace, they would reach the first Japanese position by 0430 hours, giving them 30 minutes to prepare before the 0500 shift change. Hartley's senses were tuned to maximum awareness. The Remington was slung across his back, muzzle down to keep moisture out of the barrel. He carried his rifle, the M1 Garand, in his hands for the approach. The shotgun was for the assault. The rifle was for everything else. Behind him, the other 5 men moved in single file. Davis was second, followed by Kowalski, Martinez, Chin, and O'Brien bringing up the rear. They communicated with hand signals when lightning flashes allowed, otherwise with soft touches on shoulders. At 0400 hours, Hartley stopped. He could hear voices ahead. Japanese. Maybe 30 yards distant. He couldn't see anything, but the voices were clear. Low conversation. The clink of metal on metal, someone handling equipment. Hartley motioned for the team to get down. All 6 men dropped into prone positions. Hartley crawled forward alone, inch by inch, until the first Japanese position became visible through the darkness. A sandbagged machine gun nest. Roughly 8 feet across. 3 soldiers visible, maybe more inside. A Type 92 heavy machine gun pointed east, toward American lines. Sandbags stacked 4 feet high on 3 sides. The 4th side, facing west, was open. That was the entry point. Hartley crawled back to his team and whispered the plan. Wait until 0500 when the shift change begins. Use the distraction to close the final distance. Assault from the west side. Shotgun first, rifles for backup. The team waited in the mud. Minutes crawled by. 0430, 0445, 0455. At 0458, Hartley heard movement in the Japanese position. Voices. Equipment being shuffled. The shift change was beginning. This was the moment. Hartley unslung the Remington and moved forward. Davis and the others followed, spacing themselves 5 yards apart. Hartley's hands were steady. His breathing was controlled. This was no different than walking through a cornfield at dawn, waiting for pheasants to flush. Except the pheasants had machine guns. 30 yards. 25 yards. The Japanese voices were louder now. Hartley could see shapes moving in the nest. 2 soldiers standing. 1 sitting. Another climbing out, heading toward a different position, probably the soldier being relieved. 20 yards. One of the Japanese soldiers turned. Saw Hartley. The man's eyes widened. His mouth opened to shout. Hartley fired. The Remington's roar shattered the pre-dawn silence. 9 pellets of .00 buckshot, each .33 caliber, each carrying tremendous energy, struck the Japanese soldier's center mass. He dropped instantly, dead before he hit the ground. Hartley worked the trigger. The semi-automatic action cycled. The second shot fired less than 1 second after the first. The second soldier, the one sitting down, jerked backward as buckshot tore through his chest. The third soldier was raising his rifle. Hartley swung the Remington and fired again. 3 shots in 2 seconds. 3 men down. The fourth soldier, the one who had been climbing out of the nest, spun around, fumbling for his weapon. Hartley fired a 4th time. The man collapsed. For shots. For kills. 1 position cleared. Hartley didn't stop. Military doctrine said to consolidate and secure captured positions. Hartley ignored doctrine and ran. He sprinted north, toward the second position, 40 yards distant. Behind him, Davis and the others stared in shock. They just watched a shotgun clear a fortified position in under 5 seconds. Davis snapped out of it. Move. Follow Kansas. The team ran after Hartley. The jungle erupted with noise, shouting, the sound of equipment being grabbed, orders being barked in Japanese. The second position was alerted. Hartley dropped behind a fallen tree 25 yards from the second nest. He could see 4 Japanese soldiers scrambling to man their Type 92 heavy machine gun. They were panicked, moving too fast, not coordinating. The Remington held 5 rounds. Hartley had 1 left in the gun. He needed to reload. His hands moved automatically, muscle memory from years of duck hunting. He flipped the shotgun over, thumbed shells into the magazine tube. The entire reload took 8 seconds. The Japanese machine gun opened fire. But they were shooting at the first position, at the place where they'd heard the shotgun, not where Hartley actually was. Tracers arced through the jungle, 40 yards south of Hartley's location. Hartley rose and sprinted forward. 25 yards to the nest. 20 yards. 15 yards. One of the Japanese soldiers saw him and screamed a warning. The machine gun began to swing toward Hartley. Hartley fired twice. Both soldiers manning the gun collapsed. He fired again at a third soldier reaching for a rifle. The man went down. Hartley charged the nest. The fourth soldier was inside, trying to reload a Type 38 rifle. Hartley fired point blank. The soldier dropped. 5 shots. 4 men down. 2 positions cleared in 4 minutes. Davis and the team caught up. Kowalski was breathing hard. Jesus Christ, Kansas. What the hell was that? Hartley was already reloading. That was a shotgun. Davis checked the nest. For bodies. The machine gun was destroyed. Buckshot had damaged the receiver. We need to move. The other positions know we're here. Hartley nodded. Position 3 is 60 yards north. Mortar pit. 5 soldiers, according to intelligence. How are we approaching? Same as the last 2. Fast and loud. Martinez, a quiet soldier from New Mexico, spoke up. They're going to be ready this time. I know. So what's the plan? Hartley thought for a moment. You and Chin provide suppressing fire from here. Keep their heads down. I'll flank from the south side. When they're focused on you, I'll hit them from the side. Davis said, that's going to put you alone against 5 men. That's what the shotgun is for. Before anyone could argue, Hartley moved. He circled south through the jungle, using the terrain for cover. Behind him, he heard Davis whisper orders to Martinez and Chin. 30 seconds later, M1 Garand fire cracked through the jungle, single, precise shots aimed at the mortar pit. Hartley heard Japanese voices shouting, "Return fire." The enemy was focused on Davis and the others. Hartley approached the mortar pit from the south side. He could see it now, a circular pit dug 4 feet deep, sandbags around the rim. 5 soldiers inside, exactly as intelligence had reported. They were firing east toward Davis, their backs to Hartley. Hartley closed to 15 yards. He rose to a kneeling position, braced the Remington against his shoulder, and fired 3 times in rapid succession. The confined space of the mortar pit amplified the shotgun's effect. The buckshot pattern spread wide at 15 yards. Each shot covered roughly 3 feet of space. All 5 soldiers were hit. 3 died immediately. 2 were wounded. Hartley advanced. The 2 wounded soldiers were trying to reach their weapons. Hartley fired twice more. Both men stopped moving. 3 positions cleared. 5 remaining. Then everything went wrong. 0524 hours. The team regrouped at the mortar pit. Hartley reloaded the Remington while Davis checked casualties. Everyone was accounted for, no injuries. But something was different. The jungle was too quiet. No more shouting from Japanese positions. No movement. Davis sensed it too. They're adapting. Hartley agreed. The first 3 positions had been surprised. The remaining 5 would be ready. Then a rifle shot cracked through the jungle. Kowalski screamed and fell. He'd been hit in the chest. Davis dragged him behind cover. Sniper! Tree, northeast, approximately 60 feet up. Hartley scanned the canopy. He couldn't see the sniper, too much foliage, too many shadows. But he could narrow down the location based on the sound of the shot. He looked at Davis. Shotgun's no good at that range. I need to get closer. How? Climb. Before Davis could protest, Hartley slung the Remington and moved toward a large tree 20 yards south of the sniper's position. He climbed. The branches were thick, sturdy. He reached 30 feet. Then 40 feet. From this height, he could see more of the jungle canopy. He spotted movement in a neighboring tree, the sniper repositioning after his shot. Hartley unslung the Remington. He was 40 feet up, and the sniper was in a tree 25 yards away, approximately 60 feet up. The buckshot would spread wide at this distance, but some pellets would connect. Hartley braced against the tree trunk and fired upward. The recoil nearly knocked him off balance. He grabbed a branch to steady himself. The Japanese sniper jerked and fell. His rifle tumbled separately, crashing through branches. The body hit the ground with a heavy thud. Hartley climbed down. The team was tending to Kowalski. The chest wound was serious but not immediately fatal. Davis applied pressure while Chin radioed for a corpsman. Hartley knelt beside Kowalski. The kid from Chicago was pale, breathing shallow. He looked at Hartley and tried to smile. Got him. Yeah. Got him. Good. That duck gun actually works. Kowalski passed out. Davis said, "Corpsman's coming. We need to keep moving." Hartley stood. 4 positions cleared. 4 remaining. But the team was now down to 5 men, and Kowalski's wound meant they'd be operating without their best rifleman. The 5th position was 50 yards northeast, a reinforced bunker, partially underground. Intelligence said 6 Japanese soldiers inside, with a machine gun covering the eastern approaches. Hartley studied the terrain. The bunker was positioned perfectly to defend against frontal assault. But bunkers had one universal weakness: they were designed to face one direction. The entrance had to be on the protected side, the side facing away from American lines. Hartley explained his plan: approach from behind, hit the entrance. The team circled west, then north, then east. It took 20 minutes of slow movement through dense jungle. At 0537 hours, they reached the north side of the bunker. The entrance was exactly where Hartley expected, a 3-foot-wide opening covered by a canvas tarp. He could hear voices inside. The Japanese soldiers were focused on the eastern approaches, expecting an attack from that direction. Hartley motioned for the team to hold position. He approached alone, moving silently. He reached the entrance, gripped the canvas tarp, and pulled it aside. The interior of the bunker was cramped, maybe 8 feet across, 6 feet deep. 6 soldiers inside, all facing east through firing slits. Hartley fired all 5 rounds into the confined space. The buckshot ricocheted off the log walls, creating a catastrophic effect. All 6 soldiers were hit multiple times. 5 positions cleared. 3 remaining. And Hartley was running low on ammunition, 12 rounds of buckshot left, plus 20 slugs. He reloaded the Remington and checked his watch. 0549 hours. 23 minutes until sunrise. Then he heard something that made his blood run cold. Movement behind them. Japanese voices. Multiple soldiers approaching from the south. The enemy had stopped defending fixed positions. They were now hunting Hartley's team. Rifle fire erupted from 3 directions simultaneously. The Japanese had maneuvered around Hartley's team and were now attacking from the south, east, and west. Davis shouted, "We're surrounded. Fall back to the bunker." The 5 remaining Americans dove into the bunker they'd just cleared. They pushed the bodies aside and took up firing positions at the slits. Martinez and Chen fired east with their Garants. O'Brien fired south. Davis fired west. Hartley's shotgun was useless here. The Japanese soldiers were at 60-plus yards, beyond buckshot range. He could see muzzle flashes in the jungle but no clear targets. He had an idea. He reached into his ammunition pouch and pulled out the slug rounds, solid projectiles, not buckshot. Slugs were effective out to 100 yards, and they hit like a freight train. Hartley loaded 3 slugs into the Remington and fired at a muzzle flash 70 yards south. The slug hit, he saw a figure drop. He fired again at another flash. Another hit. But he only had 20 slugs total, and the Japanese had at least 15 soldiers out there. This wasn't sustainable. Davis yelled, "We can't hold here. They'll flank us or use grenades." Hartley knew Davis was right. The bunker was defensible against frontal assault, but it was a trap if you were surrounded. Then Hartley noticed something. The Japanese fire was concentrated south and west. The north and east sides were quieter. The enemy was trying to pin them down from 2 directions while maneuvering from the others. Hartley shouted, "We break north. On my mark." He switched back to buckshot and loaded 5 rounds. Davis, Martinez, Chen, and O'Brien prepared to move. Hartley said, "Let's go." The team burst from the bunker and ran north. Japanese fire followed them, bullets snapping through the air, striking trees. Hartley turned and fired 3 times at pursuing soldiers. 2 men dropped. The 3rd dove for cover. The team ran 40 yards and dropped into a drainage ditch. They were behind the 6th Japanese position now, an abandoned machine gun nest. The Japanese soldiers who had been defending it were now part of the force hunting Hartley's team. Davis said, "We need to turn this around. We're being hunted." Hartley agreed. The dynamic had shifted. The Japanese were no longer sitting in fixed positions. They were maneuvering, adapting, using the jungle exactly the way American forces had been trying to use it. Then Hartley realized something. Positions 6 and 7 were now behind the Japanese soldiers who were hunting them. If Hartley's team circled back, they could hit the enemy from behind. He explained the plan to Davis. Davis thought for a moment, then nodded. Risky, but it might work. The team moved east, then south, circling behind the Japanese force. The movement took 10 minutes, slow, silent, every step calculated. At 0604 hours, they reached the 6th position. It was abandoned, exactly as Hartley expected. The Japanese had pulled soldiers from fixed positions to create the hunting force. But 2 Japanese soldiers were still there, both wounded, left behind when the others moved out. They surrendered immediately when they saw Hartley's team. 7 positions cleared. 1 remaining. The 8th position was the command post, the largest and most heavily defended. Intelligence said at least 12 soldiers, including an officer coordinating operations. Hartley checked his watch. 0606 hours. 6 minutes until sunrise. Captain Brennan's voice crackled over Davis's radio. "Kansas, you've got 6 minutes. Complete the mission or fall back. Hartley looked at the Remington. 4 rounds of buckshot left. His .45 pistol was fully loaded with 7 rounds in the magazine, 1 in the chamber. He looked at Davis. "I'm going to finish this." Davis said, "How?" "You've got 4 shells. I don't need to kill everyone. I just need to neutralize the command post. Kill the officer, destroy their communications. Without leadership, the position collapses. That's a suicide run, Kansas." "No. It's a shotgun run." Before Davis could argue, Hartley moved. 0608 hours. 4 minutes until sunrise. Hartley circled the command post from the east, using the rising sun to his advantage. The Japanese soldiers inside would be looking west toward American lines. When the sun rose, it would shine directly into their eyes if they turned east. He approached slowly. The command post was larger than the other positions, a reinforced structure with log walls, sandbags, and a canvas roof. He could see soldiers moving inside through gaps in the walls. At 0610 hours, Hartley was 20 yards from the command post. He could see the Japanese officer now, a captain, standing over a map table, pointing and giving orders. The radio operator sat beside him, headset on, relaying information. 2 minutes until sunrise. Hartley rose from cover and walked forward. Not running. Walking. Controlled. He raised the Remington and fired at the officer. The buckshot struck the man in the chest. He collapsed onto the map table. The soldiers inside the command post turned. Hartley fired again at the radio operator. The man fell sideways, smashing into the radio equipment. Chaos erupted. Soldiers scrambled for weapons. Hartley fired his last 2 shotgun rounds at soldiers near the entrance. Both men went down. The Remington was empty. Hartley dropped it and drew his .45 pistol. He fired as he ran forward, 6 shots, each one aimed at a different target. 3 soldiers fell. The others scattered. Davis and the team charged from 60 yards out, rifles blazing. The Japanese position collapsed. Soldiers fled into the jungle. Some surrendered. Others fought and died. At precisely 0612 hours, sunrise, the 8th position was cleared. Hartley collapsed against a tree, gasping for air. His Remington lay in the mud, empty, the barrel still warm. Davis approached and picked up the shotgun. He looked at Hartley. Looked at the 8 cleared positions. Looked back at Hartley. "Kansas, you just cleared 8 Japanese positions with a duck gun." Hartley nodded, too exhausted to speak. Davis handed the Remington back to him. "Nobody's going to call this a toy anymore." 0630 hours. Captain Brennan arrived with reinforcements. He surveyed the battlefield, 8 cleared positions, 43 enemy dead, 8 captured, extensive intelligence materials recovered from the command post. He walked to where Hartley sat against the tree, still holding the Remington. Brennan looked at the shotgun. Looked at Hartley. Looked at the positions. "Kansas, did you do this?" Hartley nodded. Brennan picked up the Remington from Hartley's lap. He examined it. Turned it over. "Read the inscription on the receiver, Remington Model 11, serial number 247851. He handed it back to Hartley. "I owe you an apology, Private. I was wrong. About you. About this weapon." Word spread through the battalion by noon. The farm kid with the duck gun had cleared 8 fortified Japanese positions in one morning. 0 friendly casualties during the assaults. 1 wounded, Kowalski, who survived and was evacuated to a field hospital. Soldiers who had mocked the Remington now asked to see it. They examined the action, asked about ammunition, wanted to know how it worked. Within a week, 4 other soldiers requested permission to bring personal shotguns into combat. Captain Brennan approved all 4 requests. The U.S. military took notice. By December 1943, the Army began issuing combat shotguns more widely for jungle warfare, Winchester Model 12 pump-actions and Remington Model 31s. Marines in the Pacific had been using shotguns since Guadalcanal, but the Army had been slower to adopt them. Hartley's success at Bougainville accelerated that process. The Japanese military filed another formal protest with the International Red Cross, claiming American use of shotguns violated the laws of war. The U.S. military rejected the protest, citing the same reasoning from World War I. Shotguns were legal weapons, and their effectiveness in close combat made them essential for jungle warfare. Hartley continued fighting through Bougainville and later the Philippines. His Remington was used 14 more times in combat. He kept a log in a notebook, dates, locations, rounds fired. By the end of the war, the Remington had been fired 127 times in combat engagements. Hartley survived the war. He returned to Kansas in October 1945, was discharged with the rank of sergeant, and received a Bronze Star for valor at Bougainville. The Remington went back to duck hunting. Hartley never spoke publicly about the war. His wife knew he had served in the Pacific. His children knew he had fought on Bougainville. But he never told them about the 8 positions, the shotgun, the mockery, or the vindication. In 1987, a military historian researching shotgun use in World War II discovered a reference to Hartley's actions in a battalion after-action report. The historian tracked Hartley down in Colby, Kansas. Hartley was 66 years old, retired from farming, living in the same house where he'd grown up. The historian asked if he could interview Hartley about November 8, 1943. Hartley agreed. The interview lasted 3 hours. The historian asked about tactics, ammunition, the shotgun's performance, what Hartley was thinking during the assault. At the end of the interview, the historian asked one final question: why did you volunteer for that mission? You knew everyone doubted you. You knew failure meant humiliation. Why risk it? Hartley thought for a long time before answering. Because my grandfather gave me that shotgun and told me to bring it back. And I absolutely knew, that it would work if I could just get close enough. Sometimes you have to prove what you know to be true, even if nobody else believes it. James Hartley died in 2003 at age 82. The Remington Model 11 was donated to a private collector, a veteran of the Vietnam War who had served as a combat engineer. The collector displayed it in his home with a placard that read, "Used by Sergeant James Hartley, Bougainville, November 1943. Cleared 8 Japanese positions in one morning." Most visitors didn't understand the significance. They saw an old shotgun, well used, nothing special. But the collector knew. And now you know. The story of James Hartley and his Remington Model 11 represents something larger than one soldier's success in one battle. It represents the evolution of American military thinking about weapons, tactics, and the value of individual initiative. When World War II began, the U.S. military had strict doctrines about acceptable weapons. Standardization was paramount. Every soldier carried the same rifle, the same pistol, the same equipment. This made sense from a logistics perspective. Supply chains could deliver identical ammunition and parts to every unit. But standardization sometimes conflicted with effectiveness. The Pacific Theater presented challenges that European-designed rifles weren't optimized to solve. Dense jungle, close-quarters combat, limited visibility, engagements at 20 to 50 yards instead of 200 to 500 yards. The M1 Garand was a magnificent rifle. Semi-automatic, accurate, powerful. But at 20 yards in thick jungle, it was no more effective than a bolt-action rifle, and its 9.5-pound weight made it cumbersome in close quarters. Shotguns solved these problems. At close range, buckshot patterns meant you didn't need perfect aim. The semi-automatic or pump-action mechanisms allowed rapid follow-up shots. The psychological impact was devastating. Soldiers hit with buckshot either died instantly or were incapacitated. The U.S. military understood this during World War I. The Winchester Model 1897 trench gun was legendary in the trenches of France. German soldiers feared it more than machine guns. But between the wars, the military forgot these lessons. Shotguns were relegated to guard duty and military police work. It took soldiers like James Hartley to remind the military what worked. By 1944, the U.S. Army had issued over 50,000 combat shotguns to troops in the Pacific. Marines had been using them since 1942. Winchester Model 97s, Ithaca Model 37s, Remington Model 11s, all saw extensive combat use. The Japanese military's protests about shotguns being inhumane were deeply ironic, given Japan's extensive war crimes throughout the Pacific. Japanese soldiers committed atrocities against civilians and prisoners of war. Their objection to shotguns had nothing to do with humanitarian concerns and everything to do with the weapon's effectiveness. American military doctrine eventually incorporated these lessons. Post-war infantry manuals included sections on shotgun tactics. The Vietnam War saw widespread shotgun use in jungle warfare. Modern military and law enforcement units still use shotguns for close-quarters battle. James Hartley didn't invent these tactics. Marines at Guadalcanal had proven shotgun effectiveness a year before Bougainville. But Hartley demonstrated that individual soldiers with personal weapons expertise could outperform standardized military loadouts in specific situations. The broader lesson wasn't about shotguns specifically. It was about the value of allowing soldiers to adapt equipment to mission requirements rather than forcing missions to fit standardized equipment. This principle extends beyond weapons. Modern special operations forces emphasize individual expertise and customized loadouts. Soldiers choose optics, grips, slings, and accessories based on personal preference and mission requirements. This flexibility improves effectiveness. James Hartley understood this in 1943. He knew his grandfather's duck gun would work even when everyone else doubted it. He risked humiliation to prove it. And he succeeded. If this story moved you the way it moved us, hit that like button. Every like tells YouTube to share this story with more people. These forgotten soldiers deserve to be remembered. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We're rescuing stories from dusty archives every single day. Real soldiers. Real weapons. Real heroism. Drop a comment right now and tell us, have you ever been underestimated? Did you prove them wrong? Share your story. Let's build a community of people who refuse to accept limitations others try to place on them. Tell us where you're watching from. United States? United Kingdom? Australia? Canada? Philippines? Our community stretches across the entire world. You're not just a viewer. You're part of keeping these memories alive. When you like, comment, and share, you're helping make sure soldiers like James Hartley don't disappear into silence. Thank you for watching. Thank you for remembering. And thank you for proving that forgotten stories still matter. These men fought for us. The least we can do is remember them.